Chapter 5 Inner Child and Trust Issues. Someone rightly said that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. If you want to patch the wounds, the best thing is to start from understanding the pain and what's troubling you. One way to find your pain triggers is to go down memory lane and identify what your childhood may have to do with your trust issues. Feeling unsafe growing up. In an ideal world, every child will have two loving parents whose primary concern is to provide their children with a safe and secure environment to grow up in. We don't live in an ideal world, though. Many children have to brace themselves and just survive a childhood of neglect, physically, emotionally, and mentally. This is the case not only for children who grow up on the streets or in shelters, but also in many homes across the globe. These are homes where parents get divorced or stay together, and homes from all financial status. Neglect can take on many forms, but the results it leaves in the lives of children who had to persevere under these conditions are very similar. The wound that neglect causes might not be physical, but it is nestled deep in the child's psyche and becomes something they carry with them into their adult lives. Even when neglected children enter adulthood, they would only become better at suppressing the wound than giving it what it needs to heal. A lot of the attributes that define you today stem from childhood experiences, and thus it is vital to explore the inner child to determine where your trust issues originated. I want to define what it means to feel safe as a child. Safety in the family environment exceeds the respect one would expect within physical and emotional boundaries. It includes accepting the authentic child and allowing the space and love needed to grow into full potential. These households often replace this love and acceptance with one or several forms of emotional neglect. Various types of neglect during the childhood years. Neglect can take on many forms, but I've listed the most widely spread concerns. Exploring emotional neglect. This kind of neglect occurs when there is little or no interest in taking care of the child's emotional needs. While parents may be absent from the child's life, it can also be because the parents are too busy career-wise or just earn enough money to keep a roof over their heads. Children who experienced emotional neglect might grow up to be adults who have low self-esteem. They might even continue by mimicking the behavior of their caregivers and suppress their emotional needs. They don't trust that others will care for what they feel and prefer to hide away from feelings or anyone who might trigger an emotional response in them. The lasting impact of psychological neglect. At the core of neglect, we'll find parents, caregivers, or guardians who never listen to the child. They never allowed the child to feel nurtured and cared for, and they wouldn't allow for an opportunity for the child to express themselves. This type of neglect has a wide range of serious consequences in adulthood that varies from having a low self-esteem, dealing with anger that is out of control, addiction, and even mental concerns. The pain of physical neglect. Caring for someone and providing for their physical needs is one of the most basic forms of love. The absence thereof during the childhood years can leave a lasting impact on any child and is hurt that will affect their adult lives too. Receiving the nurture needed when you are still young and extremely helpless is such a natural part of life. It is present in the wild and all around us. The lack of having this nurture when you need it results in low self-worth, often presented in eating disorders. Other consequences of this kind of neglect include addictions, promiscuity, and sexual dysfunctionality. On a psychological level, it can lead to high-risk behavior and complex behaviors resulting from constantly seeking safety. An example would be OCD. Ways in which you can experience neglect. I believe that one of the major causes of the widespread presence of trust issues in adults is that most of us experience some level of neglect during our childhood years. Even if you had the privilege to grow up in a stable home environment, the possibility exists that you might have suffered injury in one of the many ways in which neglect presents itself. As you'll notice, the risk also exists that if you are a parent having your child's best interest at heart, the possibility remains present that your behavior may cause your child to grow into an adult with trust issues. Being a parent truly can be challenging. Overreacting parents. You love your children deeply and would do anything to keep them safe from the dangers of the world outside. Yet sometimes it is the case that the matters that leave an emotional scar plays out within the safety of your home. This could have been the case too when you were a child. Your parents could have wanted only the best for you, but they were only human too, and sometimes children can push their parents to overreact. There are many causes that can increase the level of stress that parents experience, and it can be that their children's behavior was unpredictable, as children sometimes are, and serve as a trigger for an unprecedented outburst. Parents who overreact regularly create a volatile environment that can lead to trust issues in children remaining with them until late in life. If this is a situation that you can identify with, you will most likely agree that such an environment robs you of freely being yourself. A troubling relationship with mom. While both parents play a vital role in ensuring a happy and stable home environment, even when parents are divorced, often a poor relationship with mother figures can cause trust issues. When a baby is born, they rely on the nurturing care of their mothers, and this is a lasting bond and a need we want to have fulfilled for as long as we live. If this bond is disrupted for any reason, it can cause trust issues later on. Inconsistencies in your upbringing. Children look at their parents for consistency in their behavior, as this provides them with comfort and safety. When parents are inconsistent in their behavior, regardless of promises not kept, different reactions to inappropriate behavior, or leaving the child with uncertainty about where their boundaries are, it creates uncertainty. The lack of consistency in your childhood home can be the root of your trust issues. Not being able to access your parents. Most parents are often juggling several balls simply to keep a roof over their families' heads. This can mean that they might be involved in work, focusing on something else, or not have the time to attend to the emotional needs of their children. While it is a normal occurrence in every home that parents don't have time for their children, it shouldn't be the norm. A child should never feel that a parent is unavailable to them, as this leads to them to think that they can't be secure in having parental support. Enduring a lot of criticism. A colleague once shared her findings in a research study indicating that people are prone to give 18 forms of criticism for every single compliment they give. It sounds harsh. Sadly, it is the reality of the matter, not only in our childhood homes, but even when we've entered the adult world too. We are far more likely to be criticized than complimented. As a child, enduring constant criticism can have far-reaching consequences. The desperate need to perform. Every child is precious in their unique way, yet when you only receive positive feedback when you've performed well, can quickly instill an understanding that your value is a link to the level of your performance. While this might not have been the intention of your parents, it can surely lead to feeling unsafe in your childhood years. This might cause obstacles that can prevent you from enjoying any trusting relationships if care is conditional. How do you know if your childhood left you a fractured adult? Do you have a gut feeling that some challenges you are facing as an adult stem from childhood injury, but you would really want to be sure? Sometimes it's hard to determine where the emotions you are struggling with come from. While the symptoms can be unique to every individual, there are certain signs that are quite common in most cases. You are often overly reactive. Do you regularly find yourself at the center of mayhem, the result of your overreacting to something insignificant? While this behavior might leave you sometimes feeling ashamed of your actions, you just simply can't help it. The simplest trigger can leave you feeling irritated or detached from others. This is a lonely place to be, as it feels as if nobody understands what you're feeling. Your mental and emotional health are deteriorating. There is a vast range of symptoms that can show that your emotional or your mental health is in poor state, such as depression, insomnia, weight concerns, anxiety, low sex drive, lack of focus, feelings of demotivation. Your coping behaviors are destructive. In life, we are bound to feel overly stressed or tired, disappointed or hurt. While these are often results of outside factors which we have no control over, we have the freedom to choose how we are going to cope in these situations. If your go-to coping mechanism is something like drinking, cheating, shopping, eating, or even procrastination, it can lead to self-destruction. You repeat the same mistakes in your relationships. Look back on the last couple of relationships you had. What are the patterns you can witness in your behavior? What are the mistakes you are making repeatedly? These repeated mistakes are stemming from childhood injury. You fear making mistakes. It is the fear that sends chills down your spine, for you have convinced yourself that making mistakes will eventually lead to abandonment and you'll be completely alone. It can become so severe that you might find yourself in a state of panic or anxiety merely thinking about the mistakes you might have made. Your high tolerance for negative feedback. Do you measure your worth based on the opinions of others? How often do you simply allow others to cross your boundaries as if they don't exist? Suppressing the appropriate response to negative feedback destroys your sense of self-worth and is closely linked to childhood injury and convincing yourself that you need to avoid conflict at all times. You attach too much value in your independence. What are the lengths you'll go to show the world that you don't need anyone in life? How important is it to you to show others how independent you are? If this need to show your independence is controlling your life, you are most likely experiencing some remnants of a fractured childhood. The link between trust issues and childhood injury. Children depend on their parents or caregivers to provide care, protection, security, and comfort so that they can develop and flourish into balanced and healthy adults contributing to the world they live in. If these parents or caregivers cannot fulfill these needs, a lack of trust develops in the child's mind. It leads to feelings of uncertainty and abandonment, causing trust issues in adult relationships. We can divide trust issues into 3 categories or types. Uncertainty whether you are acceptable. Are you constantly plagued by thoughts and uncertainty whether others like you, what they think of you, and whether you are good enough? Do you think people gossip behind your back or worse even, laugh? This often means that your childhood taught you it is safer to keep your emotions and thoughts, even your wants, to yourself. While this might appear to be a safe option, remember that relationships are built on the foundation of communication. It can be very challenging to sustain the relationship, whether it is romantic or platonic. You open up too quickly. At the opposing end of the spectrum, you'll find people who simply trust blindly. It results from the desperate desire to be liked or to have a meaningful relationship that all discernment regarding whom you trust just falls away. Finding the right time to share personal information might also be a challenge for those who are battling this kind of trust issue. Being in this position can make you very vulnerable to predators. Trusting no one to do the job. Do you struggle to trust others to take care of their responsibilities? Maybe you just don't trust anyone to do anything and believe that the only solution is to do everything yourself. This can be highly demanding and will lead to eventual burnout. How people cope with childhood trauma. Survivors of childhood trauma have to deal with a wide range of challenges in life and especially in their relationships. The idea that they can't trust anyone is so deeply rooted in their being that it's challenging to overcome this persistent presence of a lack of trust. If you are a survivor of such trauma, you are most likely regularly having thoughts about trust and deeming it not to be safe. You might also feel you don't trust people, for you don't want to be a burden to them, or you prefer not to ponder for too long on uncomfortable emotions and rather just move on to the next thing without processing the negative matter. If you identify with any of these behavioral or thought patterns, I want to urge you to act on them. Even if these limiting thoughts might be around for your entire life, there are ways you can empower yourself and take control of your thoughts. How this trauma affects your mood. Unresolved issues leave the door open for external triggers to have a major impact on your mood and your behavior. As the longing for a healthy relationship with an unresponsive parent remains unresolved, it can happen that you would pursue unhealthy relationships in your adult life simply to revisit the same experience that you dreaded as a child. This behavior easily ripples far wider and leads to depression, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, and even compulsive behavior. The negative impact on your relationships. One way that trauma can affect your life and your future is through the tension it can cause in your relationships. Within a relationship, these emotions often surface as false allegations, unnecessary disagreements, assumptions about your partner, being highly reactive over the most insignificant matters, uncertainty about your partner's love and loyalty, and experiencing difficulty to accept love. Even if you attract the interest of an outstanding partner, this is the type of emotional burden that can burn out your partner, hurt the person tremendously, and end your relationship. Another burden on your relationship will also be your lack to communicate skillfully. It is quite common for survivors of childhood trauma to reflect the same style of communication that is at the root of their challenge in their relationships. An example would be if you had a parent or caregiver who would simply ignore your existence for days on end, you might be prone to do the same to your partner. Some of the communication styles you might have adopted are to be passive, and then you remain apologetic, indirect, or self-denying in your communication. Other styles are being passive-aggressive, making you self-enhancing and dishonest on an emotional level, or just aggressive and are always blaming, accusing, and attacking others. The good news is that just as you've learned these communication styles, you can unlearn them and replace them with more productive and constructive ways of communicating. Tips to communicate more effectively. Always be transparent. Be respectful. Show sincerity. Take responsibility for your actions and their outcomes. Speak compassionately and truthfully. Be consistent. Be clear on your boundaries, what you expect and accept. By following these tips, you will earn the trust of others. When you engage more in this type of conversation, it will also become easier for you to trust others. Self-care options to overcome childhood trauma. One of the highly beneficial approaches towards overcoming childhood trauma is through self-care. Having a support network you can rely on will be of tremendous value on your journey of recovery. Take time out to build and strengthen relationships with those who respect and support you. Get professional help, as a therapist can shed new light on your situation and provide you with guidance along this journey of transformation. Support groups often serve a vital role in recovery. The members of such a group have an exact idea of what you've been through, what you are experiencing, and the challenges you face. They provide a soundboard when you need to vent, support when you are ready to give up, and acceptance on the days you feel weak. Learn all there is to know about trauma. The better you understand the obstacle in your way, the more you will be equipped to overcome it with brilliant success. Realize your feelings and thoughts. A wonderful tool to explore the inner works of your mind is through journaling. Make it a habit to capture your thoughts, as this allows you to keep a record of your progress and to process your emotions while you write it down. A final word. You had no control over what happened to you during your childhood years, but you have control over your adult life. In this chapter, I've made it easy to see if you are experiencing the impact of a fractured childhood and are still dealing with difficulty trusting others. In the next chapter, we are going to explore in greater depth how to cross this gap so that you can live a fulfilling life.